Mahogany grandfather clock in the corner of Marcus Whitfield's study chimed 11 times, its deep resonance echoing through the empty mansion. He sat behind his massive oak desk, fingers drumming against the leather surface as he stared at the oil painting of his late father, a man who had built an empire through shrewd business decisions and an unwavering distrust of human nature. Trust no one, Marcus, his father had always said. Everyone has a price. Tonight, Marcus intended to put that philosophy to the ultimate test. For 3 months, Maria Santos had been his housekeeper. Unlike the parade of domestic staff who had come before her, each dismissed for some transgression, real or imagined, Maria had been different. She arrived early, worked diligently, and never asked for anything beyond her modest salary. When his prized Rolex had gone missing from his nightstand, she had found it behind the dresser and returned it without hesitation. When she discovered his prescription medications scattered on the bathroom floor after a particularly bad episode with his chronic back pain, she had carefully collected them and left them organized on his bedside table with a note, hoping he felt better. But Marcus had learned long ago that virtue was often just an elaborate performance, waiting for the right moment to reveal its true, greedy nature. The safe in his study was a Mosler double guard, a fortress of steel and precision engineering that had protected his most valuable possessions for over a decade. Tonight, for the first time since he'd had it installed, he left it open. Not carelessly, nothing Marcus did was careless, but deliberately, strategically. Inside lay $50,000 in crisp $100 bills, his grandmother's diamond necklace worth 3 times that amount, and several important documents, including the deed to his vineyard in Napa Valley. The test was simple. Would Maria Santos prove to be like everyone else in his life, or was she truly the honest woman she appeared to be? Marcus had installed hidden cameras throughout the mansion years ago, not out of paranoia, he told himself, but out of prudence. From his bedroom upstairs, he could monitor every room through the discreet app on his tablet. He watched now as Maria let herself in through the service entrance at exactly 6 a.m. As she had every morning for the past 3 months, she moved through her routine with practiced efficiency, starting the coffee in the kitchen, collecting the newspapers from the front steps, preparing his breakfast tray with the precise arrangement he preferred: orange juice on the right, coffee on the left, toast cut diagonally, everything exactly as it should be. At 7:30 a.m., she knocked gently on his bedroom door. "Mr. Whitfield, your breakfast is ready, sir. Just leave it outside the door, Maria." He called back, feigning illness. "I'm not feeling well today. I'll be staying in bed." "I'm sorry to hear that, sir. Is there anything I can bring you? Some tea with honey, perhaps?" The concern in her voice sounded genuine, but Marcus reminded himself that the best actors always did. "No, thank you. Just carry on with your usual duties. I'll be fine." He waited until he heard her footsteps retreat down the hallway before opening his door to collect the breakfast tray. Everything was perfect, as always, right down to the single white orchid from his conservatory that she placed on the tray. Each morning. Back in his room, Marcus positioned himself at his tablet and waited. Maria began her cleaning routine in the living room, dusting the antiques with the careful attention she gave to everything. He watched her work, noting how she straightened the throw pillows just so, how she paused to deadhead the flowers in the crystal vase on the mantelpiece. She treated his home as if it were her own. No, better than that. She treated it with a reverence he himself sometimes forgot to show. By 10 a.m., she had worked her way through the dining room and was approaching the study. Marcus leaned forward, his heart rate quickening despite himself. This was at the moment of truth. Maria entered the study and began her usual routine. She dusted the bookshelves, carefully removing each leather-bound volume and cleaning both the book and the shelf before replacing it. She polished the silver letter opener, straightened the papers on his desk, and watered the small succulent on the windowsill. And then she turned toward the safe. Marcus held his breath as Maria approached the open vault. She stopped abruptly when she saw it, her feather duster frozen in her hand. For a long moment, she simply stared at the contents: the money, the jewelry, the documents, all sitting there like an invitation to a better life. She glanced around the room, perhaps wondering if this was some kind of trap or if Mr. Whitfield had simply forgotten to close it. Her eyes lingered on the stacks of bills, and Marcus saw her swallow hard. Here it comes, he thought grimly. Here's where she shows her true colors. But instead of reaching for the money, Maria did something that made Marcus's stomach clench with an emotion he couldn't quite identify. She quickly looked away from the safe and hurried to finish cleaning the rest of the room. When she was done, she approached the safe again, but this time, she grasped the heavy door and pushed it closed, spinning the combination lock to secure it. Then she did something even more unexpected. She pulled out her phone and began typing. Marcus's own phone buzzed with a text message. Mr. Whitfield, I noticed your safe was left open when I was cleaning your study. I closed it for you. I hope you're feeling better. Maria. For several minutes, Marcus could only stare at the message. This wasn't what was supposed to happen. In his experience, people fell into two categories: those who stole outright, and those who were simply waiting for the right opportunity. He had never encountered a third option, someone who would actively protect him from his own carelessness. But the test wasn't over. Perhaps Maria was simply being clever, playing the long game. Maybe she was waiting for him to let his guard down completely before making her move. The following week, Marcus decided to escalate the experiment. This time, he left the safe not just open, but with a handwritten note placed conspicuously on top of the money. Emergency fund for household expenses, $5,000. Use if needed for repairs or supplies. M.W. Surely this would be too tempting to resist. He was essentially giving her permission to take money, providing her with the perfect cover story if she decided to help herself to more than the specified amount. But once again, Maria surprised him. She closed the safe without taking anything and sent him another text. Sir, I noticed you left instructions about household expenses in your safe. The current household account has sufficient funds for all regular expenses. If you'd like me to establish a separate petty cash fund for emergencies, I'd be happy to help you set that up safely. Marcus found himself pacing his bedroom, tablet in hand, watching Maria go about her work with the same quiet dignity she always displayed. She was humming softly something classical, Mozart perhaps, as she arranged fresh flowers in the entryway. There was something almost serene about her presence in his home, something that made the vast mansion feel less empty. It occurred to him that in the 3 months she'd worked for him, he'd never once heard her complain. Not about the long hours, not about his sometimes unreasonable demands for perfection, not about the fact that he rarely spoke to her beyond giving instructions. She simply showed up each day and made his life better in 100 small ways. He was only now beginning to recognize. The realization made him uncomfortable. Marcus Whitfield prided himself on understanding people's motivations, on seeing through facades to the greed and selfishness that lurked beneath. But Maria Santos defied his cynical worldview, and that scared him more than any betrayal ever could. On Friday of that week, Marcus made a decision that would have shocked his late father. Instead of devising another test, he left a different kind of note in his study, not in the safe, but on his desk where Maria would find it during her cleaning. Maria, thank you for your discretion regarding my safe. Your honesty and integrity have not gone unnoticed. I would like to speak with you when you have a moment. Marcus Whitfield. That afternoon, there was a soft knock on his bedroom door. Mr. Whitfield, you asked to speak with me. Marcus opened the door to find Maria standing in the hallway, her hands clasped in front of her, looking slightly nervous. Up close, he noticed details he'd overlooked during their brief previous encounters. The laugh lines around her eyes, the small scar on her chin, the way she carried herself with quiet strength despite her diminutive stature. Please come in, he said, gesturing toward the sitting area by his bedroom's fireplace. Would you like some coffee? Tea. Coffee would be nice, sir. Thank you. As he prepared 2 cups from the service cart Maria had thoughtfully placed in his room earlier, Marcus found himself at a loss for words. How did one apologize for 3 months of suspicion and testing? How did one admit to being so fundamentally wrong about another person's character? Maria, he began, settling into the chair across from her. I owe you an explanation and an apology. She tilted her head slightly, her dark eyes curious but patient. The safe. He continued, leaving it open. It wasn't an accident. I was testing you. Her expression didn't change, but he saw her fingers tighten slightly around her coffee cup. You see, I've been disappointed by people in the past. Staff members who stole from me, business partners who betrayed my trust, even family members who saw me only as a source of money. I developed a rather cynical view of human nature, and I'm afraid I applied that cynicism to you. Maria was quiet for a long moment, processing his words. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady. I'm sorry that people have hurt you, Mr. Whitfield, but I don't understand why you felt you needed to test me. If you didn't trust me, why didn't you simply ask me to leave? It was a fair question, one that cut straight to the heart of his conflicted feelings about her presence in his life. Because, Marcus said slowly, surprised by his own honesty, I wanted to be wrong. For the first time in years, I found myself hoping that someone would prove me wrong about human nature. And that she asked, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Spectacularly. Marcus felt himself smiling in return, a real smile, not the practiced expression he used in business meetings. Maria, I know I have no right to ask this after the way I've treated you, but I hope you'll consider staying on, not just as my housekeeper, but, well, this house has felt more like a home these past 3 months than it has in years. You've made it that way. Maria set down her coffee cup and leaned forward slightly. Mr. Whitfield, may I ask you something? Of course. Why are you so lonely? The question caught him completely off guard. In all his 53 years, no one had ever asked him that, not directly, not with such gentle concern in their voice. He paused, struggling with an answer. I suppose I built walls to protect myself, and somewhere along the way, I forgot how to let people in. Walls can be torn down, Maria said simply, but only if you want them to be. Over the following weeks, Marcus found himself looking forward to Maria's arrival each morning. He began coming downstairs for breakfast instead of having it delivered to his room, and their brief conversations became the highlight of his day. She told him about her teenage daughter, Sophia, who was studying pre-med at the local community college. She spoke of her dreams of opening a small restaurant someday, sharing her grandmother's recipes with the world. She talked about books she'd read, places she wanted to travel, small kindnesses she'd witnessed that restored her faith in humanity. In return, Marcus found himself sharing stories he hadn't told anyone in years. He spoke of his father's impossible expectations, his mother's early death, his ex-wife's betrayal that had left him unable to trust and love. He talked about his business successes and failures, his regrets and fears, the weight of wealth and the isolation it brought. You know, Maria said one morning as they sat in the sun-drenched breakfast nook, money doesn't have to be a burden. It can be a tool for good, if you choose to use it that way. What do you mean? Your wealth gives you power not just to buy things, but to change lives, to make the world a little better. Maybe that's why you were meant to have it. The idea had never occurred to him before. Marcus had always seen his money as something to be protected, hoarded, defended against those who would take it from him. But Maria's words planted a seed that began to grow. A month later, Marcus did something that would have horrified his younger self. He wrote a check for $50,000, the same amount he had used to test Maria's honesty, and gave it to her, not as a bonus or payment for services, but as an investment in her daughter's education. I can't accept this, Maria protested, staring at the check with wide eyes. You're not accepting it, Marcus replied. You're allowing me to invest in Sophia's future. Consider it a scholarship. I have a feeling she's going to do great things in the world, and I'd like to be part of that. Maria's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, Marcus thought she might refuse. But then she looked up at him with such gratitude and warmth that he felt something in his chest, something that had been frozen for years, begin to thaw. Thank you, she whispered. You have no idea what this means to us. But Marcus was beginning to understand. For the first time in his life, he was experiencing the joy of giving without expectation of return, of using his resources to lift others up rather than build higher walls around himself. 6 months after the first test, Marcus found himself in his study again, but this time he wasn't alone. Maria sat across from him, helping him sort through documents for the charitable foundation they were establishing together. Sophia had become a regular presence in the house, too, tutoring local children in the mansion's library while her mother worked. The safe stood open again, but now it contained something far more valuable than money or jewelry. It held the plans for their foundation, scholarship applications from deserving students, thank you letters from families they'd helped, and photos from the community center they'd renovated. You know, Marcus said, looking up from a grant proposal they were reviewing, I used to think that safe contained my most precious possessions. And now, Maria asked. Marcus glanced around the room at Maria's bright smile, at Sophia's animated discussion with her tutoring student by the window, at the pictures on his desk that now included photos of the people they'd helped, and realized that somewhere along the way, his definition of treasure had completely changed. Now I know that the most valuable things in life can't be locked away, he said. They can only grow when they're shared. The grandfather clock chimed 11 times, just as it had on that night months ago when Marcus had set his test in motion. But this time, instead of drumming his fingers in cynical anticipation, he was planning new ways to use his wealth for good. Instead of watching hidden cameras in suspicion, he was surrounded by people who had chosen to stay not because they were paid to, but because they genuinely cared about him. Maria had passed his test, but in the process, she had taught him something far more valuable than any lesson his father had ever imparted. That trust, once freely given and returned, could transform not just a house into a home, but a lonely man into someone who finally understood the true meaning of wealth. The safe remained open, but Marcus no longer needed to guard his treasures. He had learned to give them away, and in doing so, had discovered riches beyond anything he had ever imagined possible. And in the mansion that had once echoed with emptiness, the sound of laughter and friendship filled every room, proving that sometimes the greatest fortune comes not from what we keep, but from what we choose to share.